All right, welcome back to the Coach Doug Show. We have a special show for you today involving Antonio Brown and the Albany Empire. There's a lot going on with the Albany Empire. Today's video is strictly to find out who the owner of the Empire is. Antonio Brown said he bought the team, said he was 100% the owner, and then he came out and said he wasn't the owner, but on multiple videos he says he is the owner. Who owns and who operates the Albany Empire? That's what this video is for. We've brought on our sports attorney friend, Dan Lust, on Twitter at Sports Law Lust. Dan, thank you for joining us.
I remember there was a show, Doug's growing up. They just brought it back, Unsolved Mysteries. They don't always solve the mystery, but they cast light on all the different kind of levels in the middle. So I'm happy to kind of go down the rabbit hole with you. This is not necessarily going to be a Scooby-Doo episode. We pull the mask off of someone at the end, but we'll try to get as deep as we can in the rabbit hole and hopefully answer some questions here.
If we went into the weeds of what Antonio Brown's representatives have done as far as other businesses, as far as not paying the players, suspending players, not allowing them into the hotel rooms. They're on like their fifth coach of the season now. Ignoring all of that, just focusing on who is the owner of the team, we start off March 2nd when Antonio Brown is actually presented as a part owner. At the time, majority owner Mike Quarta introduced the Von Schillers, which is a couple in Albany. He introduced them as minority owners, and then Antonio Brown as part owner. That was March 2nd. Apparently, the half of the 95% that Mike Quarta owned, he sold half of that to Antonio Brown. Later on, we hear that Antonio Brown basically paid the $1.5 million workers' comp bill that was due, and that was kind of his fee, his payment for the 47.5%. All right.
I'm following you so far. I have some comments. You tell me when.
Go for it. Go for it.
You were the national foremost reporter on all things Antonio Brown and Albany Empire. So who am I to intersect here? I will say there's one thing that we should add, right? It's $1.5 million in payment for the first 47.5%. And then Doug's this other 47.5% that ends up going to Antonio Brown. Doug's whopping $1. That's our understanding.
I lost $1.
That's what Mike Quarta said. That's what has been reported. The other 47.5% was for $1. Mike Quarta said to a couple of reporters, which is seems to be a normal occurrence now, that he had differing opinions on where the team should be and moving forward, and so he just simply kind of walked away.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when you have an asset like even if it's not a major, like we just saw, the Washington Commanders sell for $7 billion, right? We saw the Denver Broncos sell for $4 billion. Certainly an arena football team's not going to sell for a number in the billions. I'm not even sure if it necessarily will sell in the millions, but Antonio Brown, by paying an amount of money, $1.25 million, and then I guess a buck on top of that, I'm not sure what that values the team at. Listen, you're obviously paying 1.25 into an asset. If you told me that this team was worth $1.5 million, I could certainly see that. The one thing that we should add, the Von Schiller family that's alleged to own 5% of the team, they paid somewhere between a car and a house for their 5% of the team, right? I have that somewhat right?
More than a car, less than a house.
Right. And we don't have any understanding or any reporting as to whether that was being paid for a workers' comp lien or anything like that in the back end. This asset has to be worth something. So I think when we're talking about, does Antonio Brown own the team as an initial starting point, we have to understand that Antonio Brown, no one is saying, at least as far as I've seen, that Antonio Brown owns 100% of the team. We can throw that kind of myth out right away. There seems to be a 95-5 allocation between the Von Schillers and whatever's on the other side of this 95, but let's clear that part up.
Yeah. Other than Antonio Brown and his representatives, everyone else is very clear that Antonio Brown or some other entity or representative of that entity owns 95%, and the Von Schillers own 5%. I will bring this up. It's been a few years, but I believe the reason the AFL, which is the Arena Football League, the Albany Empire is in the National Arena League, which was a league that kind of split off from the AFL a few years back before the Arena Football League went under. One reason they went under is because one of the owners who owned like 3 or 4 of their teams, he's the Washington Wizards and the Washington Capitals owner, Lamonis, I believe. He owned like 3 of the AFL teams, the Columbus Destroyers, the Washington Valor, I believe Atlantic City Blackjacks. He chose not to continue the league because the league still owed like $1 million for workman's comp issues with the Maine Mammoths, which is a team that played in Maine that was only in the AFL for 1 season. And so he shut down the entire league. He said, we're not going to do this. So they filed for bankruptcy just to not pay that $1 million workman's comp. So it doesn't surprise me that would be some kind of, payment into the team. Like, hey, I will cover this $1.5 million work comp. If you're watching the league, if you're watching the games, they are streaming on YouTube. There's not a lot of people at the games. I'm not sure how they would be able to survive on if they actually had to pay $1.5 million towards workers' comp.
I think the $1 million question here, Doug, is how so many things about the Arena Football League, how about the Maine Mammoths, but attorney-client privilege, we'll leave that but we'll say good research.
I am a fan of minor league sports. Besides the Jacksonville Jaguars, that's all Jacksonville has. And it's just I enjoy minor league sports.
How about that jersey over your shoulder?
That's a Jacksonville Sharks jersey from when
we're in
the Arena Football League. But yeah, so that's just a backstory as far as workman's comp when it comes to arena football teams. So that was March 2nd. That was the presser. Mike Quarta, introduced AB as part owner. April 16th, Times Union reported that over the phone, Antonio Brown told them, quotes, "I'm the owner, 100% owner. I don't take that lightly." And he referred to Mike Quarta. He said, "I just think Mike couldn't afford the things in regards to moving the business forward." That was April 16th. Mike Quarta said there's been no change in ownership since Brown first joined the team. He and Brown each own 47.5% of the team, with the Von Schillers owning the remaining 5%. Ryan Larkin, an associate of Brown, so we will later find out, claims to be the public relations director for the Albany Empire. He's one of AB's guys. He said that Brown owned 80% of the team, and then 2 days later, Brown again stated he owns 100% of the team. So going back and forth, doesn't seem like really anybody knows anything as far as Antonio Brown and his team. Everyone outside the team is on the same page, though. So that was April 16th. April 17th, there's a video of Antonio Brown being asked to get off the field by a security guard at MVP Arena. People are telling the security guard, like, hey, he's the owner. Antonio Brown tweeted that interaction and then claims that he is an owner in all caps. So again, he's calling himself an owner. He's saying he's the owner. That was April 17th. April 19th, this is when we get notification that Quarta has sold his the last 47.5% for $1 and leaves the team over differences of opinions with AB. So that's April 19th. So we're basically 6 weeks in now. April 21, so 2 days later, the NAL releases a statement on their website, says Brown will assume 95% of the Empire's ownership. So even the NAL, the league, is saying that Brown owns 95% and the Von Schillers own the other 5%. That was on the 21st of April. April 22nd, and after an arrest warrant was issued for Brown over unpaid child support, Brown told local news that, and this is a quote, "Yeah, well, first off, anytime you say a guy owns a team, there's going to be some garnish in the wages." Now, I personally, I've never owned a team, so I'm not sure if that's true. Do you know if that's true? Is anytime someone says they own a team that there's garnish in the wages?
I'm not aware of that specific sports caveat that you own a team. But certainly if you do owe wages, right, and you don't have maybe that money in your bank account, really any asset that you potentially own in your private capacity, be it your house, your car, it's all potentially subject to being garnished or even kind of repossessed. That's always a fear. And Doug's, as we kind of spoke about offline, that's why sometimes people will put cars in the name of a company or vice versa. You create a company to try to have some level of we call it protection via the corporate veil. But yeah, if you owe something if you owe some type of debt in your personal capacity, right, you're certainly going to be on the hook for that in terms of property, cars, anything like that, or right, the ownership of a potential team.
All right, so that brings us up to May 2nd. We're not going to get into the details, but players aren't paid. They're suspended. They're locked out of hotel rooms. Just to refer to this, because at the time, head coach Ware told TMZ the ownership change was a hostile takeover. He pretty much said that Antonio Brown just came in throwing money at everything, and it was a hostile takeover. And on May 3rd, this is really the big piece of the story. The Albany Times-Union reported that AB sent AB's team sent a letter to the Times-Union stating that he is not the owner. And the letter goes like this: I, Brown Antonio Tavares, a foreign national but not a citizen of the United States at birth, am writing to you regarding recent reports that have been circulating in the media regarding my supposed ownership of the Albany Empire team. I want to make it very clear that I am not the owner of this team, and any claims to the contrary are completely false. As you may know, I am involved with the Antonio L. Allah Express Trust Enterprise, a trust, which is a separate entity from myself. While the trust has 100% ownership stake in the Albany Empire, I myself do not have any ownership or control over the team. So that's just the beginning of the letter. It's going to continue on. Unfortunately, we don't have the actual letter, but we're going off of what the Times-Union is reporting. Let's just start off at the top here, where he says he's a foreign national, but not a citizen of the United States at birth. I mentioned in my video a couple weeks ago, that sounds like some sovereign citizen language. If you're not familiar, sovereign citizens pretty much, for various reasons, don't believe the law applies to them. And so they use language like this. They think that, they're Michael Scott in The Office.
I declare bankruptcy!
And that if they just declare that they're not a United States citizen, that the court system doesn't have jurisdiction over them, then the laws don't apply to them. So that's where we are now. AB claiming to be a foreign national. By all accounts, none of that is true, at least as far as the information we have.
That meme that they have, it's like the guy in the hot dog suit. It's like, we're looking for the guy who did this, right?
Yeah. We're all trying to find the guy who did this.
Antonio Brown is saying that, he is not the owner of the team, and any reports to the contrary are false. So, Doug's, in your little recap that you just gave, which was a beautiful recap, you've gone over, again, allegations, whatever, but it's Antonio Brown himself seemingly on a couple of instances saying that he is, quote, right, 100%, close quote, the owner. And then it's a later version of Antonio Brown, a couple of days, weeks past, and he goes, whoever said that I was 100% the owner, that was false, and that was a lie. So why I bring it up, obviously, it's comical, number one, but number two, we haven't spoke about it. I know in previous iterations that you and I have spoke about it, right? The thing that comes to mind here is defamation, right? Antonio Brown is out here speaking about, again, this Von Schiller family that's purportedly owning 5% of the team. Antonio Brown has just said that what I said in the past was false, right? And the standard for defamation, if you're not, making statements about a public figure, and these Von Schillers, it's not like they own 5% of, of the Washington Commanders or team. And even so, I wouldn't think a 5% owner of a team that you and I, we don't know who the owner is. I don't think that's necessarily a public person. But when you do speak about a private person in a way that's false, that's actionable in terms of defamation. So could this have harmed their reputation or harmed their business interest in some way, shape, or form? Certainly. We just talked about it, that they bought, or I think they spent somewhere between a car and a house, whatever that number is. You put some imaginary number on it. Imagine what your friend spent on a house, or you bought on a car. It's a lot of money. It's, I think, about in the six figures. That's what it seems like to me. So maybe that's not a lot of money to Antonio Brown, but I would think it's a lot of money to these Von Schillers. So Antonio Brown, in these conflicting statements, seems to have implicated himself for defamation. So, I mean, that certainly jumped out to me. And the other one, Doug's, I did my research here, in addition to my kind of Westlaw, which is a fancy legal thing that we do research on. I went on a Football Reference. Antonio Brown appears to me to be born on July 10th, 1988 in Miami, Florida. Doug's foreign nationals, right? I think you said that Brown is saying that he's not born in this country, that he is not born on Earth. Is that what you said?
Not a citizen of the United States at birth.
At birth.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
so yeah.
I'm not quite sure how that aligns, but maybe Antonio Brown can tell us.
You brought up the defamation and everything. I'm glad you did, because later on in the letter that's going to come up. One version of the letter that the Times-Union received, again, they're receiving this letter from two different people. The Empire team president, who is Albany Dennis, and a person who claims to be a lawyer named Marlon Oliveira. So one of the versions of the letter is signed electronically by someone named John Williams. And next to John Williams is this writing: foreign trustee for Antonio L. Express Trust on behalf of Antonio Tavares Brown. And then next to his name, it says, no prejudice, no recourse. Now, it's, again, I was only pre-law, so I can't go too far into the weeds here. But as far as my understanding, no prejudice, no recourse, that's basically them saying, hey, or it's them at least attempting to make a claim that, hey, anything that you just read in this letter is not admissible in court, can't be used against us. Is that somewhat, if a dumb person was to hear the law, is that how they would try and impact? Is that how they would try and go about and use that law?
I don't know exactly. Well, I guess I'll call it like I see it. I mean, that's not how the law necessarily functions. You could certainly, sometimes you're going to have, like we send, sometimes I'm sending letter correspondence to someone. I say, pursuant to the federal rules, anything we're saying here can't be used. It's just used being terms of settlement negotiations. I mean, there's what sometimes the rule says, and then just sometimes people doing whatever they want and kind of tramping on it. Like, it's Doug's, it's the equivalent of saying, like, you and me having this interview, which I see the red light on in the corner, and I'm like, Doug's, by the way, all of that was off the record. Like, I could try to say that, but in theory, that makes no sense. So no prejudice, no recourse. I mean, that's not the way to do it. I mean, Antonio Brown is using these documents, saying these things publicly. And just like we're talking about defamation, once you put something out into the public realm, you make some type of statement. There is no carve out in the law that says, well, you could be liable for defamation unless you wrote no recourse on the letter that you wrote that. That doesn't exist. Once it's out there in the public and someone's being harmed, or you're making some affirmative statement. I mean, maybe you can make that type of argument like, hey, we didn't mean it that way, but you certainly opening yourself up to liability. The second you open your mouth, you make any type of public statement. Hey, that was off the record. Well, you already said it. It's right. Cat's already out of the bag at this point.
And so that's the more you get, the more, if you would like to go down the rabbit hole that is sovereign citizens, the more you'll realize, like, oh, that is what they think. That is how they think the law works. And so you can kind of understand, if you thought that, then you would understand why they did it a certain way. So that's basically how the letter ends. Again, that letter was sent on behalf of Antonio Brown by the Empire team president, Albany Dennis, and a lawyer, someone who claims to be a lawyer, named Marlon Oliveira. These two people said in a phone call Monday night to the Times-Union that a foreign citizen named Antonio L. Allah is the trustee.
Very important.
So they're saying the team president for the Empire and this person who is apparently supposedly representing the trust has said that Antonio L. Allah is the trustee.
So you and I were trying to get into this offline, right? This trust, as far as you and I are aware, you and I have not had access to it. Maybe there's someone associated with the Albany Empire that's seen it. Maybe the commissioner of Arena Football has seen it. So we're not sure. And even that letter that you just read me, what was the guy's name that claimed to be the foreign trustee? John Williams?
So there's a name, John Williams. He is, that is the name that was written representing the trust, sending the letter on behalf of Antonio Brown.
Okay. I'm not sure why that title was written, except to provide further confusion about who the real trustee is, right? Will the real trustee please stand up, right? So, certainly at the end of the day, and we should kind of mention this, right? And as much as I'm an attorney, my firm deals in trust. We have a kind of complex practice with a lot of different practice areas. Just because you're an attorney, right? And I like what you say, alleged attorney. It doesn't mean that you're familiar with all potential facets of the law. What is important, and really just with basic trust, right? You are not allowed to sue the trust specifically. You would have to start some type of cause of action against the trustee. Now, when the trustee of this trust is not Antonio Brown, it's Antonio, what is it, El Hala?
El Allah. Yep.
Right. Like, then now you have to start a case against this individual. So, Doug's, you and I were kind of joking offline, like, does Antonio El Allah exist? Is that a real person, or is that just a fictitious entity that Antonio Brown created to try to avoid liability?
Who is Antonio El Allah?
Say that again.
Who is Antonio El Allah?
That's a good question.
Can you answer it?
I can't answer that question. I'm here to speak on the Empire. We're not here to talk personally about AB or any other fortitude or fashion.
So, we can all kind of laugh, and people are saying that's, obviously Antonio Brown's running amok. Who expected this could happen, right? We're looking for the guy who did this. So all these fun kind of memes that are popping up. But at the end of the day, if there is, real kind of, this is not really a victimless crime here. There are people that have invested money into the team. We talked about the Von Chillers. There are sponsors. This goes way down the line. So if Antonio Brown has created this trust to try to avoid liability, you can have a very complicated web to unweave this trust and get directly to Antonio Brown. And that's why you were, I think, saying at the beginning, like, the assets that Antonio Brown has, can these certainly be attacked? So if you abuse the form of a trust, and this Antonio Allah is not a real person, as far as we know. I mean, you and I have not seen the trust documents. I don't know who the trustee is. But if there are people looking to sue this team, looking to sue this organization, looking to sue Antonio Brown, they're going to have to unweave this kind of tangled web of the trust itself. So, I'm always of the opinion, especially with Antonio Brown, right? When there's smoke, there's fire, and now we have to talk about trust law, which is not something I ever thought you and I would be talking about, but here we are.
Even if he owned a trust, and this team was owned by the trust, that's not out of the ordinary at all. However, if you are operating an LLC as a sole proprietor, if you're actually using the LLC or the trust in a way that's not meant to be, there's repercussions for that, right?
Yeah, I mean, you and I are dealing with maybe like a limited deck here. I don't know who the trustee is. I don't know who the beneficiaries are. I don't know why the trust was created. From the outside, we can just tell you my opinion, what it looks like. It looks like it was created in terms of liability avoidance. But certainly, if the trustee is sued and the trust doesn't act the way it's supposed to, there's certainly, levels of contempt, right? There's someone you have to be able to get to at the end of the day. There has to be a real person behind the creation of a trust, or else maybe the trust was created in an improper manner. But with Antonio Brown, nothing really would surprise me at this point. Where my mind goes, and Doug's, before we get to the complicated part of unwinding the trust, like Antonio Brown is acting in such a way that seems to me, again, my personal opinion, seems to be harming the actual asset that is the Albany Empire, seems to be harming the asset that is, an Arena Football League team. I would think, just like you and I, we did 3 episodes on Dan Snyder and the process of which to kick an owner out, how that would be done. I'm very surprised here that the commissioner of the league is not, at least maybe he's doing it private, but at least publicly, he seems to be championing Antonio Brown as opposed to trying to kick him out the door, right? No matter what, I mean, we haven't seen it. I don't have access to it. We'll see if somebody sends it to us. But the league rights by which an owner could get kicked out, divested of their shares, right? Or just like we heard about in the Washington Commanders saga, a team could have been, right? The Washington Commanders sold by the league, and then Snyder could have got his cut on the back end. But I'm surprised that that's not on the table. And maybe it's because we're mid-season. Maybe they just don't want to do this in the middle of the year and kind of run amok. But I'm surprised that that's not avenue of recourse number one for all these aggrieved parties. Get directly to the league. If you're another owner in the league, I'm not sure why you're not calling the commissioner's office, but we haven't heard of it. But I would be very surprised if that wasn't happening behind the scenes. I am surprised, though, that we haven't heard of it publicly. The commissioner, that seems to be, if you're trying to really protect the league, you have to speak out against bad owners. I mean, that seems to be pretty obvious.
Well, and there's a few things for that. Just from my understanding, and watching arena football for 13 years now, these arena football leagues, it's more or less, hey, the team has agreed to play in this league this year, and so I don't know if there's any recourse in order to take ownership of the team. I know they have done that in the past when there's financial issues, if an owner can't play the team players or if there's liabilities that they can't afford, the league will step in and try to run the team at least through the end of the season to make sure it doesn't mess up any scheduling or anything. But as far as getting him off of the team, I don't know if there's any issue or if there's any recourse that way. Also, as far as the league being around, the AFL returns next year. They've said they want to start with 16 teams. The NAL, really, the National Arena League, which the Albany Empire are in, really is kind of a secondary league to the indoor football league. And there's a good chance that, the NAL may be absorbed with multiple teams going into the AFL. So there's a good chance that the NAL may not even be around next year for the team to get kicked out of.
I mean, all the more reason to put your foot down on Antonio Brown. But, I guess, and maybe there's the expression, right, all publicity is good publicity. If Antonio Brown ends up suiting up for the team, as many people are kind of speculating that he might, maybe that's good publicity. I don't know. Something doesn't sit right with me when you have someone that's, firing coaches on and off and players are getting allegedly locked out of dorms and whatnot. I just find it to be odd. So maybe at the end of the season, this thing will right itself. But I'm very surprised at the lack of kind of public admonishment from the commissioner. Right? I'm I was for many years, the fantasy baseball commissioner of my league. I got all types of gripes that were way down on the totem pole. And this is a really big gripe with real money involved in the, hundreds of thousands, if not millions. So I'm just generally surprised at the commissioner's lack of any type of public admonishment for Antonio Brown.
Yeah, and I think there might be something to that as far as Antonio Brown. I could definitely see him saying, I'm taking my ball and going home. If he already came out in public and said the NAL is low tier. He said that.
Right. We should talk about that, though. Like at a minimum, something that could get you kicked out of a league or of an association or a country club or any type of private or like a law firm or anything, even Barstool. I would think, and again, you and I don't have access to it, but I would think whatever Antonio Brown signed, be it the buying out the 47.5 owner, whatever agreement, I'm sure he had to sign something with the league. I'd be very surprised, and maybe it's just not a well-written document. I have no idea, or they're just not triggering what it should be very, very much allowed. If you speak badly about the league, you call the league low tier, which I know you're about to say, on a public forum in a chat with 900 people, and you say this in your private, your own private individual capacity, not as Antonio El Hala, you were either an agent of the trust or a beneficiary, I'm not sure, but someone associated at a minimum. Either you're the owner or you're 1 degree away from the owner vis-a-vis this trust. I'm shocked that there's no recourse for this. It just seems very odd.
Yeah, and like I said, it could very well be an issue of if you do something, he can simply say, "Hey, we're not going to play. We're done," and then the league has to find. The league has to resolve that somehow. But so we'll find out. It's we're like probably about 6 weeks away from figuring out how the league ends or the season ends. But let's get back to the attorney. Again, we don't want to get into the weeds too far here, but
20 minutes into a talk, we don't want to get into the weeds.
Yeah, but, the alleged attorney, and the reason I keep saying that is that on the Monday night phone call with the Times Union, the team president and this alleged attorney, Oliveira declined to share any personal details that would verify his credentials, including the name of the law firm or practice for which he works, or the location in which he's authorized to practice. In what world would an attorney who is claiming to represent someone not verify who they are, not at least state, what law firm they're with or in what jurisdiction they are able to practice?
I don't know if that was a hyperbole, if that was an unanswerable question. You always do. You always identify yourself. So you ask what firm, I don't know. When someone doesn't, and I've heard it happen in the legal sphere before, and I've heard it happen during Zoom. If someone is very coy about who they work for, right, and they just say, "Oh yeah, I'm an attorney" or "I'm a consultant," and you ask them, you press them a little bit. It happened during Zoom, which maybe is a story for another session between you and I, but there was instances where people during this remote era were working for 2 companies simultaneously. They didn't want company A to know about company B. So yeah, or if you're an attorney and your firm is not aware of what you're doing on the back end and you're doing something nefarious, like, "Oh, I'm John Williams." Yeah, like you have, I know this is not the lawyer, that's the national, the representative speaking on behalf of Antonio Brown, but yeah, I found it odd. What state are you barred in? Like, what? Maybe you should give us a little bit more information. So not necessarily anything bad, but any call I have, I explain what firm I'm from. I mean, that's seemingly part and parcel.
It's more smoke. And so just to finish off with the letter that was sent. We're not even through the letter, but this is the bulk of the report, or at least the bulk of the information we have. Antonio Brown finished it off. I understand that there may be some confusion around this issue. I don't know where that would come from, and I wanted to set the record straight. He says, I don't know if I'll be able to get through this. Antonio Brown states, "I take my reputation very seriously, and I do not want any false information to tarnish my name or the good work that I do both on and off the field." That is how the letter ends. May 3rd, we have the press conference where after head coach Ware is, after he leaves, after the players, don't get in their hotel rooms and they leave, the May 3rd press conference to bring Tom Menas, the original head coach from the years prior, to bring him back. There's a press conference at MVP Arena, and multiple times in a 2-minute video, Brown refers to himself as the owner.
So let's not minimize my role as a young owner, someone who's you probably never talked to in this position or role. I paid $1.5 million for the guy's worker comp. I'm the only owner. That team play in New York. The Jets play in New Jersey. The Giants play in New Jersey. You know what I mean? So I don't want to brag about myself, but I don't want to lose the sight of me being an owner and doing it. I have paid a $1.5 million bill with workers' comp. You think I want to hear about a player who's worried about my payroll? Have you understand? I just took over the situation here 100%.
And this is weeks after the letter has been sent to the Times Union claiming he's not the owner. No, he says multiple times that he is the owner of the Empire. May 7th, AB tweets out a video of himself signing and giving out checks to players. And the tweet says, "Business boomin', paid in full." So it is him saying, or him at least writing out checks or signing checks, whether they're personal checks, I don't know, but he's giving them to players in order to basically state, hey, listen, these players are being paid.
I mean, where it comes up, and we don't have to belabor the point, but if someone were to be paying players and making decisions to fire and hire and sign and make public statements, and that person had no affiliation with the team, that would be a real problem.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
Right? That would be someone acting in an unauthorized capacity. I would think if I ran a business and there was someone out paying my employees, I don't know, maybe that's pretty good, but I'd still probably have an issue with it. So, you can't abuse, just like you can't abuse the corporate form. You can't have a fake trust just for the sake of liability avoidance. But, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, right? I think people know where we're going with this. And I mean, you initially posed the question as to who owns it, right? There's someone out there outwardly acting as if they own it. But this person, maybe doesn't want to answer for their actions. So, I mean, that's at least my stance of it.
Yeah. So we know who the owner is. According to the documents, Antonio Allah is the owner of the Albany Empire. They're at least the trustee of Antonio Allah Trust. Who is Antonio Allah?
That's a good question.
He might be going to Canton someday. He might be. He might be. Yeah. So we'll see. I at least my legal nose is telling me, right? You can run, you can hide. If you put a pseudonym on top of it, you want to claim that you're someone you're not. At the end of the day, lawyers can and will, and maybe it's not necessarily lawyers, maybe it's bill collectors, right? Someone at the end of the day will trace you down. So Antonio Brown can try and call himself something he's not, but at the end of the day, he's abusing the form of the trust. There are repercussions for that. So we'll see. As we don't know who this alleged owner is, but if and when we find out, right, there could be some ramifications in the back end.
Yeah. But thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time, and we'll definitely have you back again in Judge Doug's chambers.
My pleasure.